So as you can see, the transition from Augustine to Aquinas is that Aquinas, I had already given you his justification, his explanation for existence of God, and then you see that hierarchy of reasoning that he provides there. Higher moves lower. So that pattern of reasoning is the same that Aristotle was using. Okay, and some of his ideas also resemble of that of some of the Stoics. But anyway, what you see here is that he wants to reconnect the link between God and humanity, okay, because there is a price that you pay if you say that it doesn't exist, okay. You have to say that somehow church should have control over the state. Why? Because it has access, or it has hold over the God-given law, at least the scriptural law, okay. That's the institution that will interpret it for you. So that's the way that he wants to have some control over the state machinery. It's necessary because times were changing, okay. In like 2 centuries, Europe will come out of that so-called dark ages, okay. So you see there was a movement from religious state to secular state. So in those times you need to have a rational, okay, philosophical justification, not just religious, okay. Religious justification would be, okay, this is what the religion says. That's not sufficient. You also have to appeal to reason of people, okay. So you do not mere religious justification will not suffice. So you need to give a philosophical justification. So that's what Aquinas is trying now. What he is essentially saying is that first he tells you the reason for existence of gods, and none of those reasons that we discussed were about, okay, the Bible says so. You see, most of all the reasoning there were quite philosophical in their approach. Now they could be flawed, that's a different thing altogether, but then it says that, okay, there is a higher being, and that higher being gives you laws, okay. The laws are of different kinds, okay. That's what we were discussing in the last class, okay. What are those different kinds of laws that we were discussing? So there were 4 different kinds of laws that he talks about in that hierarchy, in that scheme of the laws, okay. At the top you have lex aeterna, yes.
Lex humana,
yes, no, in that order, go in that order.
Lex eterna,
Yes.
Lex divina,
Yes.
Lex humana,
Okay.
and one more.
Yes. So the order is lex eterna. Okay. Then you have lex natura. Okay. So lex naturally, or you can say, okay. So natural law. Then you have at the same level. Okay. You have, it's not lower in hierarchy, of course. You have divine law, and then below that you have in that order you have human law, okay. Now there's a reason that he creates this hierarchy, okay. The reason is that your human law has to be in accordance with lex naturalis, okay, or natural law, and then it has to be in accordance with divine law, okay. And the divine law, of course, without any question, in accordance with lex eterna, okay. So it's at the same level, okay. But lex naturalis is just one part of the lex eterna, the other part being laws of nature, okay, in which we do not have to apply any conscious choice. But when it comes to lex naturalis, that is the natural law, in that we apply our God-given, according to him, capacity of reasoning to the things around you, to the nature of things, in fact, to the nature itself, to come to conclusions about natural law. And natural law is essentially tells you what is the right thing to do, what is justice, what is injustice. So that's your natural law. We had already discussed this in quite a detail in the other class, so I'm going little fast so that we could proceed to the next topic. So yes, that's your lex naturalis. Lex naturalis is only part of the lex eterna, okay. So there were 2 parts, if you remember. I'm talking about the second part. Lex naturalis is identifiable only by humans, not by objects, because they are not capable of reasoning, nor by animals, because that capacity of reasoning is given specifically to humans, because humans are a very special creation of God, okay, although we ended up disappointing God. But anyway, we are nonetheless a very special creation of God. And God has, what is that special why are we special creation? Because we are capable of reasoning, we participate in the same rational process, okay? And God being rational, so we participate in that entire process, okay? So applying our reason to the nature around us, we are able to come to conclusions about what I ought to do, what I ought not to do, okay? So if I drop this, it just falls. This has no choice. But whether I should kill someone or not kill someone is a choice that I have, okay? So there are lots of other philosophical questions that arise with respect to this thing, okay? What is that? It is that God has given me choice, okay? What does choice mean? That if I have multiple options, I can choose among themselves, okay? It's not predetermined, it's not predestined that I choose this or that, okay? I am the author of my choice, okay? So God has given something very peculiar to you, okay? Now you subscribe to this idea of God or not, but this idea is nonetheless important. The idea of free will, okay? Free will is nothing but your exercise of choice in the absence of constraints, okay? So for example, someone you could go left or you could go right, okay? Someone points a gun at your head and then says that you go left and not right, okay? Do you have a choice? You do not, because your choice is constrained, okay, by a threat or a force, okay? So in such case, okay, I hope you understood the concept of free will, okay? Now free will is not that simplistic though, okay? And personally, if you ask me, I say that we do not have free will, okay? The world is deterministic, okay? But we still have the illusion of free will, okay? And you need that nonetheless, even though it doesn't exist. I'm not going into all those discussions. What is being said here is that God has given you free will, okay? And you are able to make the right choice. And how do you make the right choice? If you apply reason to the nature around you, okay? If you go the right way, there will be good consequences, okay? If you take the wrong way, there will be bad consequences. Not just consequences on this earth, okay, in terms of infraction of law, then you can be punished for it, but also divinely consequences. So you could go to hell, heaven, etc., etc. All those things are there, okay? So that's the idea of natural law. Now I think that's where we stopped. Then the third kind of law, it's not lower in importance, so don't be under that mistake that divine law is somehow inferior to natural law. Of course not, they are on the same platform, okay? Now what is divine law? So we discussed that divine law is the law that has been revealed to you. And how has it been revealed? So for example, the 10 commandments which were revealed to Moses on Mount Sinai, okay? The Decalogue, okay? Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not covet, thou shalt not steal, all those things are there, okay? Although it starts with God saying that you shall not pray any other God before me, etc., etc. Of course, God has to make sure that you pray the right God. So yes, but then he also gives you some very specific commandments, okay? If you try to contextualize when those commandments, if at all given or created, whatever, okay, in those times those were relevant. But anyway, you can give them some kind of progressive modernized interpretation as well. That's also possible. But the language in which it was written, I mean the kind of words that you see there, okay, tells you that it was for the people of that time, okay? So anyway, those commandments according to the religious, okay, especially Thomas Aquinas, are nothing but commands of the God only, okay? So those are revealed in the scriptures, so there is no question of disagreement about them, okay? You have to follow that, okay? So that's the divine law revealed through scriptures. Those are God's words. There is no way you can digress from that, okay? And he says that the divine law is very important, okay? For he essentially gives you the 4 different kinds of reasons why divine law is important, okay? So one may ask that God has already given us natural law, okay? And if we apply our reasoning, then we come to the right conclusion about what is the right thing to do. And as long as we know what is the right thing to do, what's the problem? So that's it should have ended there. But then God has given us divine law. And why is that the case? There could be two different ways that you can explain that. The first way I tried to tell you guys the other day, but Aquinas also gives you reasons. Okay, so what I think is that there must have been this motivation behind this, that the church has to have control over the state. Okay, even when the state is becoming secular, the church nonetheless has to have some kind of hold authority over it. And how does it do so? By saying that, okay, we have certain laws that you cannot digress from, okay, and the state has to come to us for this law. Okay, so that's my understanding. But apart from that, the reasonings which were provided by Aquinas himself regarding the necessity of divine law, even when we have natural law, are these four reasons. The first one is that, see, the human laws, okay, that you have on this earth, the fourth kind of law that Sumit was talking about, lex humana, can only help you to a certain extent. Okay, of course they are in agreement with the natural law. Okay, so human law only helps you with respect to existence, I mean peaceful coexistence here. And on the other hand, you have natural law, okay, that helps you in to live up to the standards set by human nature. Okay, so that's it. On the one hand, you have lex humana, preventing conflict. On the other hand, you have something that says that, some laws that says that you have to live in accordance with the live in accordance with your natural human nature, okay, your innate nature. Okay, but then you may not be satisfied with that. Okay, you may not be satisfied with that, in the sense that you might want some higher level of exaltation of your existence. Okay, so you might want that. So what will you do? Okay, another problem is that not all of us are necessarily reasonable. Some of us are unreasonable. Okay, some of us might be unsure as to how to act reasonably. Okay, so in such situation also you might want to seek some help. Okay, where you are confused, so you might want some solution to your confusion. So in such case, lex divina could be of your help. Okay, so that's how the lex divina or divine law gives you some kind of higher level of existence. Okay, some supernatural existence. Okay, by supernatural I'm not saying that you become superhuman, not that. In terms of your moral existence, it takes you to a higher plane. Okay, so basically some of us are more gifted than others. Okay, now why is that the case? Did God himself make some of us less gifted than others? Then if that is the case, then what is the fault of the less gifted? When I'm saying less gifted, in the sense that those who are less capable of identifying what is the rational things to do, all those questions can and do arise. But then anyway, he would say that for those who are less capable of finding out the right path, can also aspire to live that higher existence. Okay, and how would you do that? By following the divine commands. Okay, so that's the reason that he gives for the necessity for the existence of divine law. So here's a quote that has been provided: but to his supernatural end, man needs to be directed in a yet higher way. Hence the additional law given by God, whereby man shares more perfectly in eternal law. So eternal law is the law term used because that's the highest level of law. So the part that he's referring to is the second branch of the eternal law, that is the natural law. Okay, so yes, this is a shortcut which has been provided. If you are unsure, look at what the scriptures say. So that's the first reason for the existence of the divine law, the necessity of divine law. The second reason that he provides is that relates to the first one. Okay, I told you that we are sometimes irrational creatures. We are subject to errors in our judgment. Okay, so do you want to be sure about perfect reasoning to be applied? If not the reasoning, perfect outcome to arrive at. Okay, perfect thing to do. Okay, because human reasons, like prone to error, as has been said. Okay, it's better that we have a codified law that is easier for us to apply and follow. without coming to wrong conclusions about lex eterna or lex naturalis. Okay, so that's why he talks about the importance of divine law. So you're unsure, look at what the scripture says, look at what the Bible says. So that's the second justification that is provided for existence of divine law. So it's quoted here. Secondly, because on account of the uncertainty of human judgment, especially on contingent and particular matters, different people from different judgments on human acts, whence also different contrary laws result. Okay, in order therefore that man may know without any doubt what he ought to do, what he ought to avoid, it was necessary for man to be directed in his proper acts by law given by God, for it is certain that such a law cannot err. So it's simple, okay, just a little olden way of explaining. So what is being said is that yes, we are almost 7 billions of us here on this planet. We have the processor provided to us, and we also run the software of reasoning. Okay, but because we our system's different, okay, our processing capacity is different, so even when you apply the reasoning, you do not necessarily come to the right conclusion. So that's the problem quite often may arise. Then everyone says that I'm right, everyone says that you are wrong. So in such case, to avoid such disagreements, okay, to avoid such differences, you are given something handy. So if you're confused, just look at what the scriptures say. So that's the second reason provided for existence or necessity of the divine law. And the third reason is that human makers can only legislate in relation to external effects. So what about your internal aspect? Okay, so you see this in the distinction that we quite often make between this idea of thought crime that you can think of. Okay, so for example, in practice you have not harmed anyone. Okay, you have not harmed anyone, but if you hold harmful thoughts for others, okay, the state law cannot punish you because it cannot know what's going on in your head. Okay, and probably that state law will not punish you for merely holding a particular thought. Okay, but then if those thoughts are corrupt in nature, okay, if those thoughts go against the dictates of law of nature or law of lex eterna, in such case state law is not able to regulate or punish that. So in such case there will be a higher law that will judge you. Okay, so your intention behind doing something act. So for example, you are doing charity. You could have two different reasons for it. One is that you just merely want to do good to others. Okay, or maybe it's also okay religiously that okay, you're trying to impress God. But fine, that's fine. But if you're charitable for some earthly purpose because you want to build an image and all that, so you see there is a difference in the two motives that you have here. Okay, so that is very essential. So human law is not able to regulate that, but God knows what's in your heart. Okay, so because of that, okay, to know what's the right thing to do, okay, your easy handy guide will be scriptures revealed to you by God. Okay, so you cannot complain later on to God that okay, God, you didn't tell us quite clearly in black and white what is the right thing to do. And God will tell you that I have given you the scriptures, I have already given you divine revelations, why did you not refer to them? Anyway, that's the third reason that he provides. Okay, so it's saying that consequently human law could not sufficiently curb and direct interior acts. So your thoughts, your bad thoughts that you harbor in your heart, okay, even though externally you look fine, but internally maybe you are thinking ill of others. Okay, because human laws are not able to regulate that, you need this divine law that could intervene. Okay, it tells you what's the right thing to do. And then the fourth reason that he provides is very essential. Okay, so it's a practical reason rather than some kind of transcendental reasoning here. Okay, what is that? So if you remember, we started with what is the right, what kind of law should be made by whosoever it is that is ruling. So it could be prince or other form of government, whatever it is. what's the purpose for which laws are created? If you remember, we said that laws are meant for common good. Okay, laws are meant for common good. So but it is possible that, okay, that if the state were to strictly adhere or impose or apply divine law, then it will hurt, okay, the common good. Okay, so sometimes you need to allow little bit of evil here and there. So for example, thou shalt not lie. Okay, let's take that as a divine command, you shall not lie. But we know in practical life that we live, it's not always possible for everyone to always tell the truth. Okay, so for example, if you are selling someone, if you are a trader, okay, you want to trade a bag of rice. So maybe you purchase the bag of rice for 200. You want to make profit. So when someone comes, you want to sell it in the market. When someone asks, how much is the price? You say 300. Then he says, no, that's too much. Then you said, I bought it for 270. So will you not allow me to make a profit of 30 rupees? Okay. So this person is lying because he clearly bought it for 200. Okay. So should state, prescribe such act of lying? Okay. Just a silly example so that you understand. Okay. Act of lying is wrong. Okay. Thou shalt not lie. But if we were to strictly apply it to everywhere, okay, it will hurt common good. Okay, so the outcome will not be acceptable. Okay, so to avoid that, okay, God has given you the divine law, so that if you personally want to follow it, fine. You don't want to make profit, fine. But if state were to impose divine law, it it will create problems. So hence the separation that is needed. Okay, it is for you to follow. Okay, it will not be imposed by the state. Okay, so that's the fourth reasoning which is provided, that human law cannot punish or forbid all evil without hurting common good. So if you want trade to thrive, okay, some kind of this room for what do you say, distance from the divine law should be allowed. Okay, strict adherence to that will create or hurt the common good, and that's why you need that law to be separate from human law. Okay, but then too much distance between these two is also not okay. Okay, only to the extent that it is necessary for common good. Okay, now human law, if it goes completely contrary to lex divina or lex naturalis, okay, it's going to create problems. Okay, but here's the thing, when I say human law goes against lex divina, so is he saying that only Christian states are fine, other states are not? Not that either. Okay, not that either. Okay, that's separate issue altogether, but it's only to the extent that it goes against common good. So that's the reason I hope you guys understood for the necessity of this separate kind of law called lex divina. And these are the four arguments that he provides. Okay, so Aquinas, following Augustine, had stated that by trying to do away with all evils, we would do away with many good things and would hinder the advance of common good, which is necessary for human intercourse. In order, therefore, that no evil might remain unforbidden, unpunished, it was necessary for the divine law to supervene, whereby all sins are forbidden. So yes, for you, divine law says that you shall not commit any of these sins, but state cannot impose that, because state might want you, or at least not be possible for it to proscribe all sort of sins. Maybe some kind of sinfulness in the institutions are necessary, okay, to the extent that it is required for common good, and hence you need this separate kind of law called divine law. So are you guys with me so far?
Yes, sir.
So I have some question here, but different scriptures say different things. Yes, this is a very interesting question, in the sense that if you look at God's command if you look at the Old Testament and the New Testament, yes, it's very confusing. The old God is very vengeful. Okay, if you read the scriptures, okay, it can smite you, it can drown you, it can do so many things. But in the New Testament, the God is much more benevolent. But anyway, some of the commands are very crystal clear. For example, the 10 commandments are crystal clear. There is no question of disagreement. So in those matters in which God has clearly revealed to you what you ought to do, what you ought not to do, you ought to follow. Okay, now there is still problem. So for example, you are proscribed from working on Sabbath. Okay, what to do if someone works on Sabbath? Punishment is to kill that person. So what shall we do in today's time? So those questions are always there. Okay, I'm not going into controversies. Okay, I do not subscribe to what he says. Okay, but I understand the reasoning why he is saying what he is saying. Okay, I by saying that, I do not say that natural law do not exist. Okay, natural law does not exist. Natural law exists. Probably part of the reasoning that he's giving is appealing, but the part where he's talking about divine law, I think that is more political than anything else. Anyway, that's my view. Others may disagree with me. Fine, that's fine. So yes, we can't escape from that harsh fact that yes, scriptures sometimes do not give us clarity as to what to do or what not to do. But in many others, it does give us clarity and says that we ought to follow that. So yes, these are the 4 different kinds of laws that he talks. So this is the third kind of law that he's talking about. Okay, and these are the 4 reasonings that he gives you in justification for the existence, for the necessity of divine law. So then he classifies morality into 2 different as having 2 different dimensions. Okay, one is clearly in the negative sense of the term. The other has both negative as well as positive sense of the term. Okay, so what are those 2 terms? The first kind that prohibits you from doing something, that you should not do wrong to others. Okay, you should, I mean it says that what you shall not do. Okay, prohibition in the form of prohibition. So for example, when you are told not to murder, not to kill someone, okay, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet. So all those are cases in which you are not to do something. Those are very strict matters in which you definitely shall not do something. So on these matters, state law, covet, no, let's keep covet outside. The first 2 at least. Okay, thou shalt not murder and thou shalt not steal. Okay, so you see that state law, almost all cases, I mean you can't give me examples of a case, okay, unless it's like completely nuts. Okay, a state in which murder is allowed or stealing is allowed. Okay, so that is not the case. Okay, but then there are other things. Okay, so why the distinction is necessary? As I told you, there are things that can be regulated by the state, there are things that cannot be. Okay, so the first kind that we talked about, okay, the first dimension of morality can be regulated. Okay, in such case the state law cannot disagree with the divine law. Okay, but in others there can be some kind of differences. Okay, so the second category refers to virtue. Okay, that you should be chaste. Okay, you should not be greedy, you should forgive others, humility, courage, so many things are said. Okay, the opposite to that are also given. Okay, and those are the things that are left to you to decide for yourself. Okay, so for example, if you are greedy, if you are gluttonous, if you are selfish, for that state cannot possibly be imposing punishment on you. It's going to be difficult. Okay, then someone who has more money than others, it probably will have to decide whether that person is greedy or gluttonous, and etc., whether that person is to be punished. So that becomes problematic. So in those matters you don't see state applying the divine law. Okay, but in the other kind, okay, so for example murder, stealing, etc., in those cases you see that it's easier for the state to impose that. Okay, so anyway, so these are the 2 different aspects of morality that he talks about. Okay, and you can also relate the same idea of morality with how the scriptures tell you about that same thing. And the first part is definitely are the ones that you see in which state can impose it. In the second, it's difficult for the state to impose it on you. So yes, this is something that all these philosophers could see through, that if state were to ask you to were to punish you for being, proud and for showing cowardice. In some cases, of course, state punishes you, but for that you have different reasons. But if it were mandatorily to be punishable, then it will definitely create problem. And of course, church will fall out of favor. Okay, that's why you see the politics here. As I could see, maybe you do not see it, or maybe you would like to disagree. The politics here is that, okay, too much imposition of the church-based strict law and state will lead to them not liking the church any longer. So let's say that, okay, this is up to subjective choice of individuals, and if you don't follow, then there'll be divine consequences, you'll be sent to hell, whatever. But then state will not bother about all that. So that's why you see the third kind of law, that is the divine law. So, and then comes lower in hierarchy, that is the human law. Okay, so why is it lower in hierarchy? Because these laws are created by humans, these are not God given. Okay, so that's why. So there is a very important necessity here of these laws, that is human laws or lex humana, that it is in consonance or not in disagreement. Okay, that does not go against the higher laws. Okay, they should not go against the higher law. So hence the maxim, okay, lex injusta non est lex. Okay, so if a law is unjust, it's not a law. Okay, so you must have heard about this maxim in many different forms. Okay, so for example, when Thomas Jefferson says, when injustice becomes law, resistance becomes duty. Okay, or for example, in Gandhi's idea of civil disobedience. So for example, when SALT Act was imposed on us by the British, okay, that proscribed us from so that proscribed Indians from making salt, collecting salt, and imposed heavy taxes on Indians. Gandhi came up with this idea of salt satyagraha. Okay, nothing but disobedience. Okay, why do you think Gandhi came up with this idea? Because he thought that the law, the said act, okay, SALT Act, is unjust. Okay, so an unjust law is not a law, so we will disobey the law, we will break the law. Now there are different ways of disobeying. I'm just giving you a general picture here. Okay, so it's oppressive law, it's unjust law. Okay, and we ought to disobey it. Okay, that's what he would say, and that's what he lived by marching and what do you call it, he made salt. Okay, so yes, that's an act of civil disobedience. Okay, the reasoning provided there is that it's an unjust law and we will not follow it. What does that mean? Maybe it's a law. Okay, maybe positivism says that it's a law, but we do not have the obligation of following it. Okay, because why? Because it's oppressive, it's against some moral principle. Okay, so that's the idea that we need to look into when we talk about the relation between the other laws and the lex humana, as we will just discuss. Okay, the same thing could also be seen in Henry David Thoreau's idea of civil disobedience that Gandhi himself had followed, took inspiration from, and his objection was to that of the institution of slavery that existed in the United States of America. So those were oppressive laws, and then you see that all these were referred to. In fact, Saint Augustine and Thomas Aquinas was also referred to by Martin Luther King. Okay, so who disobeyed the laws segregating blacks from whites. Okay, so when he was asked why would you disobey the law, okay, he would refer to these philosophers and then say that an unjust law is not a law, lex injusta non est lex. Okay, so that's the application of this doctrine, this maxim. So the same can be said anywhere. You may need to apply this in many different contexts. So for example, a country that comes up with a law that says that, okay, people of certain color or people of certain gender or sexual orientation will not have this right, for example, right to marry or liberty to marry, or they cannot vote, or that they come up with extremely discriminatory. Of course, some laws are of course discriminatory as long as they are justifiable, but if they come up with extremely extremely problematic laws, okay, discriminating laws, like denying someone's citizenship, protection of law because you belong to a certain religious group, okay, or doing things like that. Or for example, imagine a state that says that people of a particular group are to be robbed, okay, people of a particular group, women of that group are to be raped, ravaged, okay. If these were the laws, do we have an obligation to follow the law? Are those even laws? Okay, so these are the questions that we struggle to give answers to. Okay, legal positivists say that yes, they might be unjust laws, okay, but they are nonetheless law as long as they have been enacted following the proper procedural or whatever formal requirements are. Whereas naturalists would say, in the sense that those who, not all natural law thinkers, many of them would say that an unjust law is not a law. So what they say essentially is that lex humana has to be in accordance with those higher laws. If they are in violation of those higher laws, then they are not law. So I think we have crossed our time limit for today. So I will stop it now. In the next class, I will complete the rest of the lecture, and we will also start with a secular thinker, that is Victor Hugo Grotius, and I will share the readings with you. So kindly go through them. So with that, we conclude our lecture for today.